attack, fast fatal heart impact, past painful scars. In fact, I blast tasteful bars and packs. I back up my actions, fact don't ask, grab reactions, jacked attack with every word, then act with class as they hear me snap. I got nothing to lose, cause I fought and felt the bruise. Now I'm not the one confused, call the shots and they produce. I ain't lost, I'm finally loose, pick a new silver excuse. I need the views to boost me to a new abuse of being used. Everybody wants a piece now, y'all can rest in peace now. You're dead to me, so peace out. Remember, you're discreet out. Get ready for defeat now.
Alrighty. Now, whenever we last left off with this series, I believe I covered most of the 5 years to 6, while 2 months remained. Now, with that being said, let us go over this real quick. In the last 2 months, Midoriya began to have glimpses of his past. Somewhere around the time, this is where they started to begin, and started to really start amping up. Yoshimura, he explained that he talked to someone, Bakugo. That is what he said. The man, or woman he mistook for a man. And Midoriya didn't really see this as important, since he was told that she was a detective. However, Momo did have to explain who Bakugo was to him. It was weird, but Bakugo is the girl that she's been telling him about. The one that she's been trying to explain. She's the human. Yoshimura simply just telling her not anymore. She was turned into one of those human ghoul hybrids. This being very surprising. And, well, very interesting. Along with Yoshimura saying the information he got out of her. And she seems to be a bit loose in the head, in the mind. Apparently the CCG may have been torturing her, and are using her as a weapon. That... yikes. Yeah, it's not fun. Now, with that being said, let us cut to roughly around 2 months later, to the present day. Now, Midoriya, he is still thinking, however, as he simply just sits there in a chair, and everyone is talking, going over multiple ideas and plans, along with the humans they have that they can buy information from. In the underworld, some humans claim to have information on the CCG. Some of these claims have been fake. Some of them have actually been real. Midoriya murdered a man who tried using the same information that he got from a different buyer. That was what happened in one of the previous parts. Since this information could be another CCG leak. The CCG tries to leak some information onto the black market. They usually do it to try and discourage ghouls. Since if you hear about an operation being carried out, where a ghoul you know got that information was killed, then you can already tell that it happened. The CCG can only keep so few of these instances under wrap, however. Only the bigger ones have made the news, mostly about the owl and the king. Now, Midoriya, yeah, he has gotten some more information today, and Yoshimura telling him that this information might be about that specialized ghoul that he has heard about, or the specialized human ghoul experiment they talk about. This leak might be vital, and going to the place will provide more information. Now, they do leave and head to the facility. this one all the way across town. Now, Midoriya, whenever they do head to the facility and inspect it, they are outside, and it is the middle of the day. Everyone manipulated their RC cells in their face. And yeah, their abilities have maximized. Only the most dangerous and versatile ghouls have been able to escape the CGG custody. However, they do need to hurry before an officer or a detective does ask them for their bracelet identifications. The CCG, they found a way to simply label someone as human. They simply scan a bracelet everyone has to wear now. And if your RC cells are normal, you are considered human. However, if they are abnormal, too high, or, well, possibly too low, you have to have your bracelet set for you. However, if you go over a certain number, you are classified as a ghoul, and the bracelet will alert the nearest authorities. Now, Midoriya and everyone has been able to avoid every officer they've come across. And this facility, yeah, it looks like a 20-story building, probably 30 stories. And they don't know anything about the underground area. But that's just it. They could try and slip in, but hey, if they go during the night, it can easily be considered the best idea. As they leave, heading into a nearby sewer and making their way back to base. Now, with that out of the way, later on that night, Midoriya, he is talking with everyone and informing everyone of their operation, what they are going to be doing, and how exactly it will be executed. Once they attack that facility, the CCG is going to try and fight, try and protect it, since they are harboring something down there, something they don't want ghouls to have access to. Now, with that being said, he also does bring up the idea. If any of them die tonight, they are going to die fighting, instead of simply being hunted down, like animals. And everyone rallies behind Midoriya as they commence this operation. Ghouls descending from rooftops and beginning to cause havoc around the surrounding areas, along with Midoriya biting off a few of his fingers and creating copies of himself. Each one of these copies try to create armor or kakujas, and they are successful. Some of them create giant owl-like constructions, while others are simply able to use the Kagunes. There's even one of him with a half Kakuja. And well, he simply tells them all to go out and cause havoc. If they have multiple reports of the One-Eyed King, it is going to send the CCG into a frenzy and distract them from this area and the ghouls. Now, this is whenever they actually do break into the facility. Midoriya is simply ripping the door on the rooftops hinges off and descending down. As he rips open the elevator shaft and simply wraps this giant construct, a hand like this, around the wires, and simply starts to slide down, with Momo and Eto at his side. The owl constructs, they are very durable, and should do the job, and he's going to need backup in case anything down here is bad. Now, as soon as they all get down there, and smash onto the top of the elevator, Midoriya simply does feel it move down, the brakes stopping it from moving any further. And they all do spread out. This facility, from what they see, it does seem legit, and for the next 20 minutes, they are looking throughout every piece of information they can find or get their hands on, even breaking into the CEO's office. While Midoriya, he is staring at the elevator. He does have an idea, as he focuses on his hearing, and takes a very thin piece of metal that he bent into shape, and drops it in between. As he listens in, instead of it immediately just hitting the ground from the basement, roughly a floor below, it continues. Midoriya hearing it hit a wall, hit something else, and keep going. Now, Midoriya then simply does one thing, as he punches a hole straight through the bottom of the elevator, and begins to bend the metal out of place with ginormous Kakuja arms, before simply just looking down it. Then, as one of these giant tendrils pop out of his arm, wrapping around the elevator, or a safety guardrail, you could say, the handles that are inside of the elevators, before Midoriya simply starts to lower himself down. And he starts to go further, using his cognate to grab onto the walls and move down, as if he is climbing like a spider. Now, once they reach the lowest level, Midoriya simply forces open the elevator shaft door. Then, moving in to see what is going on. Down here is multiple experiments, multiple things he is seeing. The CCG, they are doing something. They are creating soldiers. They are creating monsters. They've wanted to see what happens whenever you implant certain things into a person, certain things of a ghoul. However, Midoriya's fears were realized. Down here, you do have experimentation on ghouls. And there is at least something in a test tube, along with a video recording to go with it. Midoriya pressing play, and watching as experiment number 2375-1 simply begins to speak, as they're just yelling to let them out, trying to smash onto the wall, as they're sprayed with Kagune suppressants, the thing that will suppress their ghoul abilities. And they begin to show off what they've done. Through harvesting certain things from a person, a human, they believe that they can implant them into a ghoul. And they started out with some of the weird quirks. One that allowed a person to elongate their body. They found a way to harvest it and copy it. They implanted this ability into a ghoul. However, it was not easy. Their project was a failure, and the ghoul simply did one thing. His Kagune in his body simply elongated to levels far beyond a natural limitation. The man quite literally stretched himself to death and ripped himself apart. Since the clip cuts whenever there is a loud explosion and the walls cover in nothing but red. And Midoriya got quite mad seeing that, as they go throughout the facility and see more and more of the research, watching what happens and what goes on. More and more people, their people, given quirks and seemingly dying. As whenever Midoriya looks on the computer and it asks for a password, he cannot think of it, simply deciding to take this data with them, picking up the computer and putting it into a backpack. putting in everything he can of this piece of technology. And, well, one of the computers that they are able to access by simply just typing in password, surprise, surprise, run by very high tech and high security level people. Yet some jackass still had the password 01. Now, with that being said, they do actually see some more recordings. These recordings should be high tech and secretive. However, they seem to be normal, since Midoriya simply sees a little girl. A girl possibly around the age of 7 or 8, no more than 10 years old. And the doctors are simply trying to get her to use a quirk. Midoriya thinking for a second that this girl is human, before she watches what happens. Whenever someone did bring in a human ghoul hybrid, they simply did one thing. They simply aged into nothing, a pile of clothes forming on the ground. Whenever she started crying, they simply sprayed something in her face. And for a split second, Midoriya saw it happen. He saw veins form around her eye. She is a human ghoul hybrid. They're making child soldiers. That is what Midoriya thinks. That is what he understands. And he wants to save them. Something inside him is screaming out to save her. And, yeah, that wasn't the only thing. By the time Midoriya and everyone else thought about this, the CCG, they've already gotten inside the building. And security, wires were already tripped. Midoriya and everyone has to fight their way out. As Midoriya simply does one thing. He covers his arms in a muscle fibers. At least they look like it. His Kagune. As pieces of his Kagune simply begin to move up independently, as if they were moving like centipedes. And Midoriya, he waits. Before one man passes by a wall, and he has his weapon drawn. And Midoriya's arm completely comes through the wall, grabbing onto the man and actually picking him up. Before simply, this thing on his arm shoots directly upwards into the man's throat, and impales him through the chin and rips out his lower jaw. Before the men try to fire, Momo and Eto rushing through the walls. And these detectives, thinking that they are surrounded, they ambush them with a trap. They knew they were coming. Now, with that being said, Midoriya and everyone do begin to tear apart these detectives and brutalize them. As Midoriya smashes one into a wall and simply stabs a Kagune directly into their leg and begins to twist it. The man trying to scream through his gas mask, Midoriya ripping it off of his face, along with actually cutting into a part of his nose. As Midoriya yells at the man exactly what the hell were they doing down here. The man not able to give an explanation, simply just screaming out in pain over and over and over again. The man is unaware of this research lab and this facility. He was simply told to come down here and clear out the ghouls. He was told that this was a nest under the CCG. Well, Midoriya and everyone know the truth, screaming about ghoul experimentation. Midoriya is just trying to get answers as Momo and Eto, they're trying to interrogate some of their own prisoners. Momo is currently digging a kakuja foot into the back of a man's back, and has it thoroughly wrapped around his spine, yelling at the men for answers. as he simply just tries to scream. Watto is slowly choking the man to death. She's a bit too angry to figure all this out, and she simply snaps his neck after the man loses the color in his eyes. Now, Midoriya's prisoner is one of the only two left alive, and he simply asks which one of them are in charge. The man stating that the man on the floor is not in charge. Now, as soon as Momo heard that, she immediately ripped out his spinal cord and threw it to the wind, as both these two walk over to Midoriya. And he simply asks once again, as two things begin to pierce into his body. Momo stabs into his arm, while Eto stabs into the other man's leg. And Midoriya begins to form his entire Kakuja, simply growing in size as the man is held against the wall. Midoriya's hand was completely over the man's throat, holding him. Now, it's holding onto most of his upper torso. And Midoriya is leaning downwards, simply just stating, "Where?" The man doesn't know. And Midoriya squeezes him as hard as he can against this wall, the man's head and eyes popping like a balloon. Before Eto and Momo simply leave with him. Midoriya basically climbing his way through the elevator shaft and smashing through the elevator and busting through the walls as he fights his way through the CCG blockade. And, well, yikes. The CCG, some of their information has been revealed, along with the computer Midoriya took from them. Now, someone was observing this all happen. Someone was staying out of the action. They simply tried to follow the ghoul. As soon as she heard that the actual owl was on the move, she gave orders to simply not engage. She's going after it herself. And she followed it. Now, while most investigators lost track of it, her superior speed and her quirk gave her an advantage, as Midoriya and everyone do escape into the sewers. Now, with that being said, she climbs in after them, and she's actually having a harder time catching up. Ghouls are able to move faster down here, as she uses her Kagune, and goes after them. Now, eventually, Midoriya realizes that they're being followed, trying to collapse the tunnel. And as the tunnel is collapsing, Momo can actually point out the ghoul, seeing light zoom across her face, as a car on the surface simply passed by. And well, that face and the way it looked familiar, simply pointing out that that might be Bakugo. And Midoriya, he was a bit surprised, as they simply begin to try and ambush this ghoul. Now, if this is a Queen Squad member, they can sell it, and make possibly another 150 million yen, or $1 billion. Somewhere around that in their actual currency. Some of their buyers use American money, and they don't really try and be too whole complicated by it. Now, with that out of the way, after moving around and Bakugo trying to find a way around, yeah. Eventually, they do ambush her. Midoriya hiding in the shadows, and as soon as she gets close enough and passes by him, he immediately just jumps out, and throws out a giant hand. immediately grabbing onto her and wrapping around her, as Midoriya throws her behind him and immediately tries to attack her. Her going on the offensive, and trying to fight back, out of instinct. Now, as soon as that does happen, Midoriya simply does one single thing. As soon as this giant thing does try and slash at him, he immediately just simply blocks it, blocking it with a giant arm and immediately twisting his hands, grabbing onto her wrist as something in his arm moves upwards, grabbing the blade and snapping it in two, before it drops to the ground. Momo and Eto simply watching as Midoriya then manifests his full Kakuja, and slams her up against the wall. Now, she simply just tells them that they can't be doing this. Now, as soon as she confirms who it is, she's a bit more surprised. One eye on the owl. That is right. Her thinking that this is the other one, simply yelling for the one-eyed king. As the mask, Midoriya brings his hand up and pulls it off. And Katsuki sees his face. And then Momo and Eto walking out from behind him. And she is both surprised and shocked. Momo is alive, first off. Second off, there is another ghoul, another one-eyed ghoul. Her thinking that this is a member of the Quinx squad. Now, she's too focused on Midoriya to simply have those thoughts, her rational ones, go through her mind. Tears streaming down her face as she simply just says Izuku. And Midoriya's heart, something skips a beat. And Midoriya pulls back the giant hand, as she falls onto her hands and knees, and begins to cough up a little bit of blood. Midoriya slammed her hard enough against the wall to dent it, and actually hurt her. Momo trying to help her onto her feet and ask her if it's really her. Not very sure as to what to say, let alone what to do. Now, Midoriya, he's having a little bit of flashes, and his mind is starting to race. Glimpses of his past, growing up. The incident on the swing sets one day, where he was so fearful of her finding out what he was. And some of their training after school. Some of their training. Constant explosions and barrages against his body. And trying to fight against her. Now, that is what he's remembering, starting from ground zero. Now, she then simply does try and get an explanation. Momo asking her exactly what happened to her. Well, she basically has to explain something. Without taking her eyes off of Midoriya, she simply explains that she was given a deal. They think that she was in bed with a one-eyed king. And, well, they're right. Everything she's had to do for them in the past 5 years has been nothing but torture and hell. They see her as nothing more than a monster. They called her a human ghoul sympathizer. Sympathizers have their rights taken away. Then, they gave me a deal when they tried to release me, thinking that that would be all. Then the organization we consider to call V tried to attack me and take me. The CCG killed them, and was able to actually bring me back into custody. V considered me to be important, and that being on my track record now, they considered me to be a ghoul informant or something. Information that could be important or vital. Now, I'm not sure what to say, but is it really you? Is it really you and not that feral thing that attacked me? Midoriya is simply looking at her confused, as he sets down his backpack, walking over and simply just telling her that he's not too sure as to who she is, but she is in his head. He sees something, and he's at least heard of her. Midoriya bringing his hand up and running it across her face, as she simply doesn't know how to respond. She freezes up once again, just like whenever they were younger. Just like how she should have made a move on him whenever she had the chance. Momo took the initiative that day. However, she doesn't, and she moves forwards, rushing to hug Midoriya, and then going up and giving him a kiss. Momo and Ed are just watching as Midoriya's face is frozen. He froze up this time, and she simply embraces him, giving him a hug and trying to explain everything to him all at once. Meanwhile, the CCG is wondering where Detective Katsuki went, and is currently trying to reactivate her earpiece. As soon as it's reactivated, she does hear it in her ear, immediately turning and looking at it, as she simply brings her hand up and holds it directly into Midoriya's face. Him not too sure what to say, as he does one thing, takes it from her fingers. He knows exactly what she's talking about. If she says something, then they can consider her to be alive, and the CCG currently has running water on their columns. As the next few words that do crack through somewhat strike fear into these men. You make hybrids of us. You give humans our abilities. But what we saw down there, you're turning us into you. The monsters that wear masks and hide behind the law. You're next. Midoriya crushing the earpiece. As there is no life signs of Detective Katsuki. Now, they are unsure as to where she is, as she also did take out her tracker once. They tried implanting her with another one, but she took it out once more. She took it out on that rooftop. And Midoriya walks over and picks up the backpack, not saying a single word, as he simply brings up his hand and points forwards, as they all continue to walk through the sewer, and eventually wind up at the hideout. Now, with that being said, I do hope you guys enjoyed, and have an amazing day. I'll catch you guys in the next part.